Hello, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about the history of Christianity after the New Testament, but before Martin Luther. And we're going to focus on the things that don't involve the Catholic or the Orthodox Church necessarily, because they kind of got really bad, as we know. So I've never seen a video about this topic before, so I figured I'd make one. Usually people just talk about, at least in regards to the post-New Testament church, they talk about the Council of Nicaea, where, everyone agreed, the Trinity is a thing. People also talk about, how they canonized what was in the New Testament. Like, they decided at some point, all the books that would be in the New Testament. And then there's the Council of Ephesus, where they decided Jesus was fully God and fully man. Apart from that, you don't really hear about, what happened in between them. Then that's actually of spiritual value, I would say. So I'm going to go through quite a few things that happened that were relevant. First off, we have the Antidicomarians, which were a minority in the church that did not believe Mary was a virgin forever. Now, if you don't know about the perpetual virginity of Mary, it's time to tell you about it. So, in the Catholic and in the Orthodox Church, they believe that Mary never had sex, ever. I know, really bad. Like, Joseph really got, Anyway, I guess this is one of Satan's attacks on the church. It's like, hey, we really have to emphasize Mary being a virgin, even though there's really no reason for that to be focused on, and to believe that she was always a virgin. But it started to happen, and there were people who were against that, and the church leaders of the day were not too happy that people didn't believe, Mary was a perpetual virgin. Another name that comes up, this is still 300s or 400s, Arius of Sebast, or Arius of Ponte. He basically believed that there's no difference between the priest / bishop or the regular Christian, which we know is heretical to the Catholic Church. He believed that the Feast of Easter was a Jewish superstition. You can kind of see where, because the New Testament doesn't really tell us Christians to, celebrate those holidays, and so the fact that they were kind of forcing people to do it was kind of weird. I mean, people have their own beliefs on the holidays, but this was clearly wrong. He also said that it was wrong to prescribe fasts or abstinences by law. So, the Catholic Church, well, we know today that priests can't be married, and there's the whole, not eating fish. I think the Bible's pretty clear that people's opinions on food and stuff, and what they want to do with marriage is up to them. It's I think Paul says, "Can I not take a wife?" But anyway, they were attacking these things. And there's also this verse that says in the Bible that in the last days that people will forbid the eating of certain foods, and they'll forbid marriage, and that's precisely what the Catholic Church was doing. And lastly, he believed that it was useless to pray for the dead. Okay. Then there's Helvidius actually. Again, against the perpetual virginity of Mary. He focused on how the verse talks about Jesus' siblings, and he's it's very clear. But then, the Catholics come up with their, very cringe justifications, no, those are Jesus' cousins, or Joseph had a children by another wife. Like, anyway, let's move on. There's Jovinianism, which was, well, basically, okay, so all these guys that I'm going to mention, they were not like alone. Other people also followed them, and if they didn't, that also happened. But they weren't just alone. And so, for example, Jovinian's followers were called like Jovinians or whatever, and it was called Jovinianism. Anyway, he actually started believing in perseverance of the saints. That is, you don't lose your salvation. He was also against the perpetual virginity of Mary. He was anti-monastic, which means he didn't believe, being a monk and hiding away in the forest or the mountains was what God wanted believers to do. It's possible that this belief system, or these beliefs, the followers of Jovinian, they survived their basically, they might have gone to the Alps and stuck around till the Middle Ages, at least. That's a theory. Anyway, now we're at around 400 AD. We have Vigilantius, and he was also against it says he opposed monastic asceticism and the superstitions connected with it. I guess it's like, monks have special, like, I guess not talking to people and not saying anything for years gives you special powers, is I assume what people were thinking. Jerome, famous church leaders, they attacked Vigilantius, called him a monster, for believing that the graves of martyrs and saints should not be venerated, opposing virginity, and being against fasting for the saints. It's like, it speaks for itself. He was against relics. Relics were like, oh, here's the tongue of a saint, and like we need to venerate it, which is another word for worship, but they don't want to say they're worshiping, so they say veneration. And then venerating saints, he was against that. He considered the superstition idolatry. He said his adversaries worship bones and ashes of dead men and called them idolaters. And he said intercession for the dead is useless. I'm not sure if people actually did fast for the saints, that is fasting for dead people. Like, I don't know what the point, why they would do that. That seems really stupid. But intercession for the dead is, praying to the saints to do things for you. These are all like modern, beliefs that, Protestant Christians have, but, it's obviously been around for a long time, even if others try to deny it. Then we have the Paulicians, which, we know from like what the Catholics said about them, is that they were iconoclasts. They rejected the veneration of images and the cross. They used fire rather than water in baptism, which is interesting. And they had a simple concept of priesthood. I mean, it's kind of obvious that, what the Catholics call priesthood versus, what the Bible teaches is completely different. And what the Bible teaches about, like, being a bishop that is just a leader in the church is totally different than the Catholics. Anyway. Then we have this guy named Claudius, and it seemed like he believed that, salvation is by faith. He was also against idol worship, and he was really hated, but he stood his ground. Then we have Pelagianism, which is really interesting because if you read the Wikipedia page, it just like it lists a bunch of their beliefs, which sound like Bible verses, like it's straight out of the Bible, but the page is stating as though, like, this is like personal opinion. It's like, they chose to believe Jesus was the Son of God. Like, obviously not that, because, even Catholics believe that, but yeah. 800s, you have Ratramnus. He taught against the wine and bread. So here's another thing that is important that doesn't seem important. So they believe that, the Catholics and the Orthodox, that the bread for communion becomes Jesus' literal body, and the blood becomes Jesus' literal blood. That might not seem like that big of a deal, but essentially what happens is you end up having people bowing and being required by law to bow before like the bread and the wine when they're like bringing it somewhere, like the priest is taking it to a funeral or whatever. And like at the church, the people are calling the bread and the wine Jesus. So like, yeah, it's a very sneaky way of inserting idolatry into the church. Then we have the Chandrakians. The Armenian Church is the oldest state church, I believe. And but here's an example of around the 1800s to 1000s, this sect called the Chandrakians that were not liked. And according to an Armenian monk, this is what they believed. They don't believe in, I guess that the Armenian Church has the authority, or the sole authority to decide who's a priest and stuff. They also deny that the body and the blood are in that the wine and the bread is that. And that they called the Armenian churches their baptism as basically just bath water. They considered Sunday the same as other days, which is a belief system that is all right in the Bible. It says like some people think some days are special, others think all days are special. So they refuse genuflection, which is like bowing, like the cringe bowing that they do. They don't venerate the cross. Again, they don't worship crosses. They ordain each other and follow self-conferred priesthood. I mean, that seems fair. People should be able to. They don't accept marriage as a sacrament. So basically, what a sacrament is, if you don't know, is it's like simple things like confessing or being baptized are turned into like these mechanical rituals. And it's like this weird mystery religion aspect that the Romans added to different parts. And I think it's just saying they didn't treat it with the same superstitious attitude that the Catholics and the Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox did. They reject matag as being a Jewish practice. Matag is when they would slaughter a chicken for God. Obviously, there's no point in doing this. And the last accusation is they're sexually promiscuous. I think this might be related to the fact that they didn't consider marriage a sacrament, so maybe this monk didn't consider their marriage as valid, so he considered them sexually promiscuous. But maybe they were. I mean, it seemed like they had a bunch of good beliefs, but maybe they did struggle in that area. Also, 1800s, we have Goldspalk of Orweis. I think he's the most interesting guy. He believed that predestination comes before works. So that's an interesting thought. I think especially if you don't really think about predestination. He's basically saying those who God predestined, to be with him, because of that, that's why they do the good deeds. Which might not seem like a big deal, but he's basically saying it's not the works that save you, which is, pretty big deal because again, a lot of time at this time, a lot of people believe it's the works, but they'll say no, it's works and whatever. But yeah, he wasn't a lot of other bishops supported him in this. So these are not fringe beliefs. All right, around 1000 AD, we have the Albigenses. They denied the idea of purgatory. That is, if you're a Christian and you still have some sins, you have to suffer for thousands of years for them. It says they were against the crucifix. I think that's again, crucifix is like a cross, but it has Jesus on it. I don't know if I don't think that means that they were against having a cross with Jesus on it. I think it means they were against worshiping it. Praying for the saints, praying for the dead, and transubstantiation, which again is like the whole like blood and wine. And they wanted to return to a pure faith, so closer to what the New Testament church believed. Then there was a guy named Talcum. He was also against the real presence. That's like another name for transubstantiation, or something in that category. 1100, we have Peter of Bruges. He's against christening of infants. So, like in the Bible, like if people who have faith in Jesus get baptized, but the Catholic Church started, doing it on infants, which doesn't really make sense because they can't. How can they have faith? Like they don't even know they exist. Rejected prayers for the dead, against the Eucharist, veneration of the cross, and ecclesiastical ceremonies. So yeah, he's just against all the ceremonial aspects, which are totally unnecessary. And we have John Wessel, and he, I think, he believed that scriptures were they were the trustworthy source of authority, so you didn't need the Catholic Church. Obviously, a controversial belief. The Church teaches that. I think that because of them, because they say the scriptures are valuable, that's why they're valuable. So that's how the Catholic Church sees it. He also believes the names of the predestinate are written in the Book of Life and cannot be erased by a priestly ban. So again, throwing away the authority of the Catholic Church. Indulgences do not profit. That's like things you do, like paying money so that your relatives spend less time in purgatory. Ridiculous, I know. He said that Christ is not pleased with the festivals of fasting, pilgrimages, or priestly celibacy. The pilgrimages is like they would I don't know, one of their rituals was they would go to different places, and that was supposed to make you holy or whatever. Sometimes you'd go and you'd touch the tongue of a dead saint, and you'd hopefully be healed of like your broken foot, things like that. Christ's body can be in the bread without any change of the bread substance. Yeah, like the bread doesn't literally have to turn into Jesus' body. That's an acceptable belief. Pope and councils are not to be obeyed if they are out of accord with the scriptures. He whom God chooses will be saved, irrespective of popes and priests. And all who have faith will enjoy as much blessedness as prelates. So I think, the Catholic Church is all about hierarchy, and here you have true believers popping out of everywhere who are standing against it. You have Joachim of Fiore, who said the Catholic Church would not be saved by reform. I just bring that up because it's interesting. This guy, it's like 1200s, and he's saying reforms will not save the Catholic Church. And I mean, it's true. They did have some reforms after the Protestants came about, but it's still, they still believe in salvation by works. Then we have Henry of Lausanne, rejection of the doctrinal disciplinary authority of the Church. And I'm just going to do this straight from Wikipedia because I like how it's written. So rejection of the doctrinal disciplinary authority of the Church, recognition of the gospel freely interpreted as the sole rule of faith, condemnation of the baptism of infants, of the Eucharist, of the sacrifice of Mass, of the communion of saints, and of prayers for the dead, and refusal to recognize any form of worship or liturgy. All right. And we have Arnold of Brescia. He denied infant baptism. He denied the power of the Roman Church, and he thought the clergy that sins, that is sinful or I think actively sinful, doesn't have a right to administer the sacraments. Again, things like marriage and baptism and for repent, whatever, confession. They consider his views on baptism and the communion offensive. We have Marsilius. He's sometimes called a forerunner of the Reformation. He believed only the scriptures are the source of truth. It's very similar to that previous guy. Then we have, the last thing is he believed that papal decrees are not necessary for salvation. So that's kind of a beautiful thing. Like, it doesn't matter what the Pope says. 1300s, we have the Friends of God. And they predict that God's judgment on the Catholic Church was coming very soon. So 1300s, so we are very close to the Reformation. So yeah, obviously this judgment did come, and the Catholic Church ended up no longer being the sole church of Western Europe. Then we have the Strigolniki in Russia, who wanted anyone to be able to give sermons. We have the Lollards. I'll just read this straight from Wikipedia, because I like how it's written. Did not believe that the church practices of baptism and confession were necessary for salvation. They considered praying to saints and honoring of their images to be a form of idolatry. Oaths, fasting, and prayers for the dead were thought to have no scriptural basis. They had a poor opinion of the trappings of the Catholic Church, including holy bread, holy water, bells, organs, and church buildings. They rejected the value of papal pardons. Special vows were considered to be in conflict with the divine order established by Christ and were regarded as anathema. Anathema meaning, not of God. It's what they would say to people who were, kicked out of the church. 16th century martyrologist John Fox described four main beliefs of Lollardry: opposition to pilgrimages and saint worship, denial of the doctrine of transubstantiation, and a demand for English translation of the scriptures. And lastly, in the 1400s, we have the Hussites, who fought. They basically fought in wars, and there were Hussite groups that wanted more. Basically, they fought with the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church eventually decided to agree with one Hussite sect, which simply wanted to be able to, also do communion their own way instead of the whole, bread becoming body stuff. And they fought the other Hussites and won. The other Hussites having a lot of the similar beliefs as we've listed off earlier, like being against many of the Catholic beliefs. But, the Catholic Church pretty quickly, switched back to attacking the Hussites. But they never really were able to, squash them, and it was kind of back and forth. And it kind of continued like this. The Hussites stuck around up until Martin Luther came. So yeah, that's the history.